Your attention, this is the 2 o'clock virtual farm tour sponsored by CEMEX. We'll get into David a little bit here, but my name is David Packard. I'm the Eastern Regional Business Development Manager for CEMEX. Just a couple brief things with Dave. He's somebody I respect quite a bit, very detailed, you know, very much of a results-oriented person. We're going to base this virtual farm tour on genetic strategies and you know, kind of how Dave has crafted some of his solutions and how CEMEX is helping to meet the needs of the future. So, Dave Harvatine.
All right. I don't know if my mic is on, if everybody can hear me. Yes, as David said, my name's Dave Harvatine, Dairy Herd Manager, partner in Aurora Ridge Dairy. And with that, I'll just start right away. Aurora Ridge Dairy, we are a dairy farm located in Aurora, New York, and for those of you that have never been to New York or don't know where Aurora, New York is, we're right in the heart of the Finger Lakes, so beautiful dairy country, lots of wine for those that ever want to make a trip to Central New York for a wine tour. Aurora Ridge Dairy is a dairy operation. We have currently operated about 5,200 acres. Mixture of corn, alfalfa, wheat, barley, and some soybeans. So we're kind of diversified on the crop side, try to utilize some rotations in our cropping enterprise as far as nutrient management and growing as much of the feedstuffs as we can for the dairy. We are 100% registered Holsteins, and we have been 100% genomic tested for probably 7-8 years. So in the beginning, we weren't 100% genomic tested, but we have been for a long time. Currently, we have about 2,350 milking and dry cows and about 2,250 head of young stock. So here I just kind of put a map of New York up to kind of give an idea where we are. We're located in Cuyahoga County, so kind of right, and when we say central New York, we mean central of New York State, not central New York as in New York City. So it's kind of interesting that perspective. I just wanted to kind of briefly touch on what we have for a staff on the dairy. There's 35 full-time equivalent employees. And then I just wanted to break down and kind of recognize what we have for what we call our leadership team. There's 4 of us that are partners in the business, Bill Cook, Jason Burrows, myself, and Dan Westfall. And that's Bill started the dairy over 30 years ago with 65 cows. And we've grown almost entirely internally over the last, 30 years with herd growth. And then I just want to recognize some other people that are kind of what we consider key members of our leadership group. We have Garrett Miller, who's a dairy herd manager at Oakwood Dairy, which I'll kind of touch on in a little bit. Scott Bailey's our feed manager, so he's in charge of all of our feed purchases, nutrition, working with our nutritionist. And then Lauren Barloon, who's our shop manager that oversees everything as far as our cropping enterprise. When you have that many acres to crop, you always want to make sure when the equipment is needed, it's working. Industry partnerships. We are a part of Cuyahoga Marketing, which a lot of people in the world wouldn't know what Cuyahoga Marketing is. Cuyahoga Marketing was started as a group of farmers getting together to kind of pool their milk together to get a better milk price, pool their input purchases together to get a better price. It kind of grew from that. We worked with Dairy Lee, which was a cooperative in the Northeast years ago, which then got kind of became part of DFA, and now Cuyahoga Marketing, we are our own. I guess kind of like a co-op, and we market all of the milk for 29 farms. So there's 29 farms, and we market about 1 billion pounds of milk per month from those 29 dairies. Cuyahoga Milking Ingredients, 5 years ago, we, as Cuyahoga Marketing, one of the big costs when you're producing milk is on the hauling side. So we were trying to cut down our hauling expense. So 5 years ago, we started the operation. 6 years ago, we started building it. We built a $100 million milk processing plant. The dairy farmers of Cuyahoga Marketing invested the money in that. So it's kind of interesting because we are the dairy farmers and we own the milk processing side. We're into the milk powder side, cream, specialty products, so very much going for that value-added aspect of the milk side of the business. Another interesting thing about how we operate, Aurora Ridge Dairy operates, is what we call dairy management contracts. So we feel very strongly about our abilities on the dairy management side, and we recognize some opportunities locally to leverage our asset of our people. So Oakwood Dairy is another dairy about 20 minutes north of us. We've been working with that dairy for about 10 years, and we manage everything on the cow side. So everything from the milkers, the scheduling, the employees, everything on the cow side we manage. What was great for that opportunity is we were able to leverage our people, have better performance at that dairy, and just kind of, versus losing people, provide opportunities for our employees. And then just mention Cook Farm. Bill Cook, who founded Aurora Ridge Dairy 30 years ago, that was his home farm. It's still his brother farms there. So we've also gone down there and we manage the cows on that dairy, just trying to leverage what we have for people. Just briefly speak about the milking herd at Aurora Ridge Dairy. Currently we're milking 2,000 to 2,050 cows 3 times a day. We have a double 28 Germania herringbone parlor. It is equipped with Affimilk, so we utilize the Affimilk technology for heat detection, sick cow detection, or alerting us on what cows to check. And currently we're making 95 pounds per cow per day, 375 butterfat, 305 protein, and somatic cell is always, right now it's probably at the highest level it'll be just because we're coming out of the summer, but there's a lot of times through January, February, well, that number will be down close to 100,000. So we're very focused on producing quality milk from our operation. And then I just kind of listed there from a cow comfort standpoint, we have water beds and we have a methane digester, so we utilize all of our manure solids for our bedding. So we're very, very devoted to the nutrient management side. So by utilizing the manure solids, you always have manure solids, so we can bed our cows heavily, and it's just you're always recycling those nutrients. So there's not a lot of added cost for that. Now I'm going to kind of touch into kind of why I'm here is on the genetic side. In the past, before genomic testing came out, our approach was kind of how it's listed there. We're going to breed for type. We're going to breed for the type of cow that we want to look at, that we want to have on the operation. And we're going to, as they say, we're going to feed for production. We focused on the top proven bulls, and that's kind of how we were very successful. Why did we want to change? Why did we want to look at genomic testing? As with any operation, no matter if you're milking 60 cows or 2,000 cows or 10,000 cows, it's all about what's your cost of production. One of your huge costs of production is feed and labor. So we were trying to figure out how can we have more production with less inputs. So that's why we looked at, from a genetic standpoint, I've always been interested in genetics ever since I can remember, and we always believed strongly in genetics. As we've grown the herd, we've always invested. We considered an investment, not a cost, from whatever our semen expense is. Then just look at our current genetic program. Like I said earlier, we're genomic testing all of our heifers. Currently, we have about 100 to 130 heifer calves born each month, which is more than we need. But over the years, as we've used genomic testing and improved the herd, our reproduction has gotten better, our production has gotten better, our milk quality has gotten better. So I like to say we're always chasing our tail. My goal is to have that perfect, I call it heifer alignment, so that we only make as many heifers as we need versus making more heifers and culling the bottom. So kind of, this is my phrase that everybody kind of jokes about with me is I say, well, we're just going to keep the best and sell the rest. And they're like, well, some of the calves you're selling are still pretty good heifers, and it's my strategy has always been I want to keep the best, and I want to just get rid of the rest. So currently, I just kind of listed out. So if you look at on an average, this 2525 TPI, 725 net merit, 1300 milk. That is the heifers that, if you currently look in the herd, that are 9 to 15 months of age. As with any genetic strategy, as you're improving, our rate of progress is so great that if you look at our baby calves, it's going to be higher. If you look at our heifers that are 2 months from calving, it's going to be a little bit lower. So I just kind of picked that middle of our heifer population to kind of give an idea of where we are today. Like I said earlier, with our breeding strategy, we look at the semen as an investment, not a cost. We are 100% genomic young sires. I just kind of pulled this together. I looked at the bulls after the August run, and I said, okay, the bulls that I'm currently using in the tank, what do they average for TPI, net merit, PTA milk, PTA fat type? And I was kind of shocked by this, to be honest with you, because I always pick the highest bulls from the best cow families, in my opinion. And when I saw these numbers, I thought it was quite impressive. It was impressive to myself how we've grown so much in the genetic side. Then one thing I just want to touch in, I got 18 genomic young sires. I'm a firm believer that you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket because over the last 10 years you can probably think of some bulls, or you can come up with a list of bull that was going to be the next greatest thing, but as they've, whatever with their progeny have changed. So I'm big about diversification in bloodlines, diversification in the what attributes do they have, so that we're breeding a herd. For me, I've always been focused on breeding a herd versus breeding individuals. So I always laugh when somebody says, what's your best cow, or what's your best heifer? You get a tour and everybody wants to know, what's your best cow, what's your best heifer? And I can never answer that question because my focus has always been on a herd. Because you're only as strong as your weakest link, and if we're constantly pushing the whole herd, we're going to have better performance versus having some extremes at the top and some extremes at the bottom that are slowing you down. In our cow breeding program, we do use some pre-sync, off-sync. What I have learned over the years is as you improve the herd genetically, you don't need as much of the synchronization. We do utilize some prostaglandin to get cows cycling, but as a whole, the number of cows that we off-sync breed, timed AI breeding, it's marginal. It's less than 5% on our herd. Sex semen, we do utilize sex semen. Currently, we're focusing that on our heifer population. We did utilize some of that in our milking cow population, but what I've seen over time is that as you improve the herd, you can't just pick the top 10% or top 15% for sex semen, because really now I would rather use a conventional bull on more cows to improve my genetic diversity of that, because that top 10% that you might select and say, hey, we're going to use sex semen just on those, with a couple a couple proof runs, you might have daughters of a single bull up there affecting that 10% or whatever you pick. So that's why I've branched that out, just more on the diversification thing. So I just list high-end bulls to 40% of the herd, some bulls that I list some bull names there that people would probably recognize. And then we've focused on, I've been a big proponent of utilizing the beef semen. We're primarily Angus in what we use. We have used some Sim Angus, we've used some Limousin, but for me, I really like looking at the Angus just because I think you have a higher quality product there as far as the certified Angus beef. So right now in our milking herd, the bottom 60% of our cows all get Angus semen, which is kind of interesting because that 60% and lower, those are pretty much cows that are about 600 net merit and lower are getting beef semen. So 600 net merit, genomic net merit and higher are getting conventional. Heifer breeding program, we rank our herd based on genomic net merit. You can pick what you like. Some people might say TPI is more reliable, or they like that better. Some might want to say use genomic net merit because it's tied to my bottom line. I like to use genomic net merit because of my herd breeding philosophy. I like to you're putting kind of a dollar value on the genetics of your herd, and that's what we've done. I also do kind of look at TPI, PTA milk, somatic cell score, and DPR. It's kind of interesting whenever I see somatic cell score these days, because when genomic testing came out, nobody likes treating mastitis cows. Nobody likes dealing with that aspect of it, and we were very intense on culling everybody that was over a 3.0 on somatic cell score. So what's interesting is you fast forward 10 years, and now most times with 2,000 cows milking, we can have 5 or less clinical mastitis cows. So I see an actual result of what we've done. Now other things have changed, milking procedures, stall management, cow comfort, there's all those other things, but it's kind of interesting, so I still look at that. In our heifers, we're using that best sex semen that we can buy in the top 70%, and then I just kind of broke it down. The top are going to get obviously more chances. The next tier is going to get 1. If we're doing a lot of embryo work, whether it's conventional ET or IVF, we will use embryos on those. It just depends on where we are as far as making embryos and whether we have inventory or trying to catch up. And then, excuse me, pretty much the bottom 30% of my heifers, I'm going to try to get an embryo in them. If they come in heat and it doesn't line up with an embryo, we breed all of those to beef. Just because nowadays we're not in the market to create we're trying to limit the number of extra heifers we create because the heifer market obviously is depressed and there's more value in the beef calves. Here I broke this down for people wanting to see, kind of where we stand. I broke it down on a GTPI and a genomic net merit basis, kind of where we are. I get excited about seeing the really high ones, but for me, I'm always looking at where's the median of the herd, where's the middle of the herd, and where are we pushing the herd genetics. But I thought that might be interesting as somebody wanting to see where we are. Future genetic program, I think it's always, I always say that I'm an eternal optimist. I'm always trying to think positive about things. Obviously, when you're in the dairy industry, you could easily get yourself down. I'm always an optimist, looking to the future, what's coming, technology, those kind of things. So in my mind, where will the future herd be? I see that as a high FE's feed efficiency. As we're going down the future, we obviously want to produce more milk, higher solids, butter, fat, and protein. Obviously, who wants to haul water to the processing plant? And on the feed efficiency, if we can have a cow that eats less feed, we have less manure, less waste product to deal with, and that's obviously expensive dealing with the waste product. And fertile. We've seen drastic improvements in the fertility of the herd just with what we've done, and I have it on a later slide. Where I see the future is I see it as getting to a point where it's either sex semen or beef semen. I think Holstein bull calves are eventually going to be the Jersey bull calves of today. Future goals, I kind of listed there, sex and beef semen. And then my heifer inventory alignment. I always say with heifer inventory alignment, it's always a hard thing to chase or to get perfect because you're breeding cows today. You kind of know how many are going to get pregnant, but then you don't know of cows that you might cull, so you're going to lose pregnancies. And then by the time they get here, it's another 9 months till they're on the ground. IVF, in vitro fertilization, that's something we have used in the past. And I see long-term as that is another option at Aurora Ridge Dairy. OPU is oocyte pickup, I think is what it's, ovarian pickup, or I don't know what that, OPU is where they're collecting the oocytes from the donor dam. So I see that, doing that on farm with our size. Will we get to the point where we can employ a full-time person that would just do that as part of our staff. Another thing I want to talk about, I've always been a big believer in technology, whether it's on the genetic side or the management side. AI-24 is something that we have used at Aurora Ridge Dairy since the fall of 2012. Initially, we used it on our heifers for heat detection, and has grown from there. So I just kind of listed out, that's been very, very wise investment for us. We're running over 95% of our heifers that we preg check are pregnant. And kind of the benefits in my mind is age of first calving. We've been able to narrow down that age at first calving, improve that first service conception rate, so you have less feed costs in your heifers. That's one of those hidden costs that nobody thinks about. But I know every time we look at it, every 100 extra heifers that we're carrying is usually 10 to 12 cents per hundredweight on our feed costs. So we're very focused on that. So that's kind of where we see it. Timing for AI and ET program. Obviously, you're doing a lot of embryos. We've been able to match the stage of the embryo with the stage of the heifer heat, so we can have improved pregnancy rates with both our IVF embryos and our conventional embryos. Another part of the AI-24 that we've used at Aurora Ridge Dairy is we use the rumination aspect of that on our transition cows. So we teamed with Dr. Julio Giordano at Cornell University. We're only about 20 minutes from Cornell, which I know in the Badger State you probably don't like Cornell, but I'm in New York. So we partnered with him, and we did a study looking at our fresh cows. And we've always been very intensely focused on our fresh cows. That first 30 days is where we've invested a lot of labor, a lot of time. Also, there's a lot of costs there. I always feel if you get that cow through the first 30 days, you're pretty well guaranteed a good lactation for that cow. So what we did in that trial is we looked at how good could the technology tell us who was sick versus how good could our people tell us how sick the cow was. So when we went through the trial, we realized that we were being too aggressive, which is kind of interesting. Too aggressive, and we were using too much pharmaceuticals on our fresh cows. So we've actually backed off on our fresh cows. And the way I look at it is if you have 100 fresh cows and you only have 5 that are, you got 100 fresh cows and there's only 5 that need attention, I guess I should put it. Well, you have 95 that you should not bother. So whether it's with headlock time or time out of the, you're disrupting her cycle. So for me, it's always been, how can you not worry, focus on those 5 cows versus affecting 100 cows to get those 5 cows. So that's been good on our fresh cows. We used to spend about 1.5 hours to 2 hours in labor checking through our fresh cows. Right now, we have one guy, and in about 30 minutes, he can go check the fresh cows and take care of them. So if you think about the labor of that over a year, another thing that I always kind of find interesting, we used to go through a case of XNL treating botrytis, a case a week. Now we don't even buy a case a year. So as far as return on investment and payback, that's been a huge benefit to the dairy as far as our cow performance and our antibiotic usage. So I've kind of talked about this a little bit, looking, what's the future? Even, no matter how old you are, I think you always got to be looking ahead. What's the industry going to do? I've been at Aurora Ridge Dairy for 18 years, and I can remember how things were then, how things kind of were halfway through my career there, and how they are today. And I get excited looking at where they're going to be in 10 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and where will they be in 20. I think technology, obviously, there's technology for every aspect of the operation. It's a matter of doing your research, looking at that, and technology, I think, is huge. Labor, I don't think it matters where you are. Labor is getting harder and harder to find reliable people that honestly want to work on a dairy farm. Dairy farming is 24/7, 365, and I think nowadays there's a lot of people that don't want to do that. I was kind of born into that life, so that's how I'm wired, but I know it's harder to find people that accept the fact that Christmas morning somebody has to be there to take care of cows. So the future, I think technology and labor efficiency, labor, trying to design a job for people so that's enticing to work in the dairy industry, but also be able to get the work done, but give them the life that they want to live. If somebody wants to work 40 hours a week, but wants to work on a dairy farm, I think that's the future. We need to look at how can we do that. Feed efficiency, that's something I kind of tied into earlier. Feed is expensive, it costs a lot of money, there's a lot of waste product that you got to deal with when you're milking cows. So feed efficiency, I think, is huge. From a genetic standpoint, trying to develop a herd that's uniform and efficient so that we can be as productive as we can. And then the health and the welfare standpoint, I think utilizing genetics to achieve a healthier animal, I think is good. I think it's, if you can create an animal that's healthier, that has less need for antibiotics or any interventions, I think it gives us a better picture for the general consumer. And animal welfare, I think that's huge. If we can continually to improve the cow comfort, the cow care, which we all, it's always cow care and cow health. It's always one of those things. We're doing a good job today, but how can we get better? I think you always need to. You never accept where you are. You always have to look at, no matter what it is, how can we be better? And I just realized I probably went way too fast for some of you, but then I want to say thank you. I want to say a huge thank you to CEMEX for nominating Aurora Ridge Dairy to come out here to kind of do a virtual farm tour. I love questions, so I probably went a little bit fast because I was nervous about getting done too fast. So we'll have questions. The only other thing I want to thank is I just want to thank my partners back at Aurora Ridge Dairy and all of our employees for keeping the ship sailing while my wife and I are out here in Madison.
All right, so as Dave said, we do have plenty of time for questions.
Oops.
So
how did I do that?
A lot of topics. Huh?
You're the tech savvy one, not me. Go to the first one, Brian. One more.
So we'll open it up for questions. Dave covered a lot of things. Brenda, you want to get one in the middle there?
Sorry, the question is, at what age do you do the genomic testing? And has that changed over the years? And the second question is, what's it cost you to get it done, and where do you get it done?
So the genomic testing, when it initially came out, we just did the top 25% of our young stock at birth, and then the rest we did later on. From a labor efficiency standpoint, right now we get the RFID, the Bangle tag, and the matched TSU from Holstein. So when we have a calf born, we do the RFID, we do the ear tag, we do the TSU, so we're doing everything at the same time. I would love to get to a point where I could cull those calves as soon as possible, but it just seems like that 500 pounds is usually about the earliest you can cull them. We're still doing the genomic testing early on because it kind of fits in our mold. All of our genomic testing is done through CEMEX with the Elevate. So what I love about that is that I have the app on my phone. My calf manager will do calves once a week. Tells me this is from this year tag to this year tag. I just go on the app, boom, boom, put them in the mail. So that makes it pretty easy. I don't have to create an Excel sheet. I've done testing other ways. I don't have to deal with paper, all that stuff that just takes time. So for me, it's a real streamlined process because it doesn't even take me 5 minutes. Probably takes me longer to put everything in the envelope and put the sticker on and put it in the mail. So that's what we do. We've been using the Elevate from CMEX probably last summer, I think is when we started.
I'm just wondering, you said you do genomic testing, milk production, and value addition on the same farm? You do genomic testing, milk production, and value addition on the same farm? Value addition. Like processing of the milk?
I'm confused.
You do? I'm asking, in Aurora Ridge Dairy, you do milk production.
Yep.
Genomic tests you do by yourselves still?
The actual genomic test?
Yeah.
So we just take the TSU, which is just a little tissue sample, and we mail it away.
Okay, that's also what I was wondering, because it's too much to do that. And
no, we do the easy route. We put it in the mail, and we wait for 2.5 weeks later. And
yeah, and you said you process the milk too. You do make cheese and stuff.
So the Cuga Milk Ingredients is our processing plant. So most of the product there is we'll skim off the cream and sell the cream to customers, and then we do a lot of milk powders. Oh. So we do a lot of milk powder, and we export milk powder all over the world.
Okay. Another question. You said you've reduced your first calving to, I don't know what age, but how has that affected the health of the cows moving forward? How long do they stay in the barns? Or
so with the age of first calving, what's kind of been a huge benefit with everything is we start breeding heifers at 380 days of age, so 12 and a half months. We usually run like a 70 to 75% conception on that first breeding. So we have a very tight window of when the heifers calve. By utilizing sex semen or beef semen, we have decreased the metabolics on our 2-year-olds. So I honestly can't tell you today when the last time we had a 2-year-old that had a displaced abomasum. Our RPs on the herd are less than 10%. Our metritis is less than 10%. So the health of the herd has been better, even though we're calving the heifers out younger.
Okay, thank you. The last, I still have 2 more questions.
Okay. You were taking notes, right?
Yeah, yeah. You said you breed 60% beef, Angus, right?
Yep.
Where do you take them to? How long do you keep them in your farm?
So the Angus calves, we twice a week we have a buyer that comes and takes our bull calves and all the beef calves.
At what age?
So he comes Mondays and Thursdays. So pretty much on Monday he'll take everything born last Thursday through Saturday. Anything born Sunday through Wednesday goes on Thursday.
Then there's something interesting I want to know. How did you reduce a fresh cow a checkup and maintenance, and if you have like 200 in one pen, how do you reduce that? Because you have to go through each and every.
So with the SCR, the AI24, the rumination technology, we have 200 to 250 cows in our fresh group. Yeah. So we just go on the data flow software, we print out the report, and we identify these 5 cows we need. Yes. And we go out in the fresh group and we look for those 5 cows.
You don't look up on any other cow?
No.
Oh, okay.
So I always say we invested in the technology, and you have to just trust. Okay. You set up a system, you set up a protocol, and that's just, and we. Okay. If there were, I'm a very detail-oriented and results-driven person. So if it wasn't working, we wouldn't be still doing it.
Yeah, I'm just interested because I've seen something I like there, and maybe I can talk to you later. Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, and I mean I was a doubter because being a cow person, you always think that can somebody else do it as good as you? I guess you would say. And after we did the trial with Cornell and we saw how good the system worked, it was quite impressive. So that's why and I think with anything, if you're going to make an investment, you have to if you're going to make the investment, you got to make a change, because if you invest in the technology and you don't change how you're doing anything, you're not going to see a reduction in labor cost. You're not going to see results if you don't make a change. So that's, it's kind of a hard thing to, a lot of people are kind of getting a routine, and it's hard to change people's routine. But I mean, Usually the people are the hardest things to change. The cows don't know what's going on. I mean, they like routine, and I think it's better now for them.
Dave, how frequently are you rotating sires out and bringing new ones in then?
So usually every proof run. The other thing that factors into it is conception rate. So I usually, if I have a new bull, I'll use 50 units. I'll get through 50 units. If he's performed well on those first, by then you only have 10 or 20 units that you've actually seen conception rates on. So that's kind of where you make the first decision. If he's good there, I'll continue to use him once the first 50 units is through. Most of the time, to be honest with you, if the conception rate's not 50 or above or pretty close to that, I'll switch him out. Because there's so many genomic bulls and there's so much that all the different bulls have to offer. I don't want to accept that. And at the same time, I think it's good to keep changing, because if you get caught up on, it's easy to get caught on a bull and say, hey, geez, wow, this bull's 60% conception rate. I'm just going to keep using them. I think that's bad, because then you're putting, as the saying goes, too many eggs in one basket. And I don't always pick the highest, because I'm looking at the cow families. I still want to know that there's actual performance behind them. So that kind of ties into it as well.
Do you use a mating program at all, or?
Yeah, so we use the Optimate, I think is what it's called. Yeah, so we use Optimate. The thing that for me it all kind of aligned, because I could do my genomic testing. All that genomic information could get fed into the mating software. So I don't worry about inbreeding. I don't worry about haplotypes. And we have it in all that gets put into my dairy comp, so it doesn't matter which one of my guys is breeding a cow. If she's in that bottom 60%, her matings are listed as beef. So I can't be there every day, and I can't be there every hour of the day, so it allows people to just be more efficient, because cows in heat, they look her up on dairy comp. She's first service, I use this bull. It's second service, I use this bull. It's third service, I use that bull. And I've adapted my dairy comp, so based on times bred, it will automatically change their matings from the elite genomic bulls to beef. So a pregnant cow is more important than getting a calf out of our highest genetics. So it's kind of interesting, because a couple years ago, our highest heifer on the farm, her mother got bred to beef in her first lactation because she was making too much milk and didn't get pregnant. So then here I got this high genomic heifer that I'm flushing, and her mom's bred to beef. But I think you got to make it's compromises, but I guess I'm always looking at it as on the herd basis. So you can't you got to lose the touch. I still like the individuals, but I think you got to stay focused on the herd. And the other thing that I'll make note of is it's a long-term investment. Everybody wants the genomic testing, and everybody wants and they want to see results right away. And it takes a while to get where you want to go.
Dave, just one thing to cover while I walk here, but what % of the herd is 2-year-olds versus mature cows?
So right now we're about 40% 2-year-olds. I would love to have that number lower. About a year and a half ago, when heifer prices really went down, we didn't sell as many heifers as I was, and how many heifers as I should have. So we kind of kept those, and we put more embryos in. So we went through a big flush this past July and August, where we had 100+ heifers calving every month, which was way too many. So that kind of pushed us up. My goal with the beef semen is I only want to have 70 calve a month and keep my older cows. The other thing is, with genetics being an investment, if you don't keep the cows around long enough, you're not going to reap the benefit of improved genetics. So you might have a third lactation cow right now that's so much better, but if you got all these heifers coming in, you prematurely push her out the door, and that's where all your production comes from. That's where profit comes from. So that's why that heifer alignment, Bill always kind of, he always kind of busts me because he said, well, you know, you've been saying that for years and you haven't figured it out. What's taking you so long? You know, it's like, well, I didn't expect the heifer price to go down. I didn't expect the milk price to go down. We've always used a lot of beef semen, but when you're culling, when you need to cull cows, all the beef semen is in your lower genetic animals or lower performance animals. So then all of a sudden, you're planning on 70, 80 cows calving this month to beef, and 20 of those I just sent, you know, prior to going dry because of functional issues or somatic cell or three-quartered or that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's a huge focus of mine right now, is to try to get to the point where we can reap the benefit of the genetic investment.
So my question is, how long does a cow normally stay on the farm? Like, how many lactations does she do? What's the average?
I would probably say 2 1/4, 2.5 lactations. So it kind of goes back to my goal. If I can have fewer heifers calving in, I can keep my cows longer. All these young folk in the front should have lots of questions.
That's from us.
What is that?
That's from us.
Oh.
At the dairy that I've involved with, we've been running a similar program to what you described for about 3 to 4 years now. And where our challenge is that now that all the heifers and all the animals that we have coming in are all pretty high numbers. And so have you found it difficult to make those decisions now of good animals leaving? And what's been your experience? Have you guys have you narrowed the numbers so that the top ones are all really close? If you'll explain your experience on that, and then how do you decide to get rid of which animals to call when you have too many?
So for me, it's always gone down. I go back to my principle of we're going to keep the best and sell the rest. So I always figure the people buying our bottom end heifers now keep they keep getting a better deal because they're getting a better heifer. And I struggle with that sometimes, but I guess you just kind of got to keep focused on where you want the herd to go. It is kind of interesting because when you breed a huge percentage of your herd to beef semen, you create a higher replacement, and then you sell off those bottom replacements. So then all of a sudden, if you're looking at the bottom, say 50% of your heifers are going to carry embryos, the quality of those heifers are that much better. They say, well, these should all get bred to sex semen. Probably should, but my opinion is I've created a more fertile animal in that bottom half of my heifer population, so I get a higher pregnancy rate on my recipient, which in turn generates more for me long term. I remember the times when, like, the middle heifer, was say 450 net merit, so 450 net merit and lower got an embryo. Well, now it's 7 1/4 and lower are getting an embryo these days. So it's kind of, I guess you just always got to be looking forward down the road, and yeah, if you look at the individual, it'll drive you nuts. I know that from experience because, there's heifers that are a result of IVF or embryo transfer that I sell. So then you think, well, you spent how much money to do all that, and you culled her at a pretty much break even. I'll just say, well, that's where I didn't do something right.
At that point in time, we just have to say we're glad we're there, and we have to make those difficult decisions.
Yeah.
What would be your optimum number of lactations in the herd?
Optimum number of lactations.
Yeah, so a cow would have, you said you had 2 1/4 lactations. What would you optimize that at to get a balance between the genetic improvement and the extra production from older cows? Where would you see that at?
That's an interesting way to look at it. And it's true, the optimum balance. I think you always want to have turnover of the herd. I guess my goal has always been to get the number of 2-year-olds down to about, I would love to have it be like 35, 30, 25, 20, you know, something like that where it's kind of incrementally down. That way, if we always are introducing, you know, 70 new 2-year-olds a month into the milking herd, you're turning over it's in essence a genetic turnover almost.
I just was wondering, because the work that was done by Mark Armbruster and also Albert DeFries, and Mike is at Cornell and Albert DeFries at the University of Florida. When they were doing their modeling, it would look like 4 years might be able to balance that out. So if a cow had 4 lactations, it might have a balance in that. And I just was wondering from your experience in real life whether that is matching what these scientists are telling us.
Well, yeah, because I mean, you're even as your 2-year-olds are more productive, you never get, you know, whether you look at week 4 milk, you look at peak milk, you look at any breakdown in any stage of lactation, those older cows always outperform. The other thing that's kind of interesting is if I look at our 2-year-olds today compared to our 2-year-olds a year ago or 2 years ago, our 2-year-olds are so much better now. We have 2-year-olds that are producing 120 pounds that bred first service to sex semen, you know, so it's like, well, in my mind, I don't want to see that cow out the door in 2 years, because if they're doing this as a first lactation, they're going to have more second and even more third. And I think that's how that's how you're able to produce more components, more milk, more product on less feed. Because it's interesting to me looking at the herd, how the herd performs. So for instance, I had the class, we classify everything. So we did like 462-year-olds last week. And it was interesting to me looking at, if you look at the quality of the 2-year-olds now, I forget what it was. I think it was like 58% of the 2-year-olds that I scored were good plus or better, which I felt pretty good about because they all calved at, you know, 109.5, 110, 111. We're scoring all these 2-year-olds that are like 2 to 2.3, 2.4 age-wise, you know, to see that. And I think there's fewer of those ones that you just want to cull.
Just to add to that question that gentleman just asked, I wondered if you just use that example of that 2-year-old milking 120 pounds now, and you compare that to a mature, larger cow in your herd that milks 140, 150 pounds. I wonder if you've gotten to the point where you can see genetically that 2-year-old is doing it more efficiently now than she was, or her great-grandmother was, you know, 6 years ago. And if so, how much better is she getting? Are you able to get her to eat 50 pounds of dry matter to produce 120 pounds of milk versus mama who has to eat 65 pounds to do that? I wondered if you had a number on that or if you see that trend coming.
I don't have a number on that, but I can agree with you. So in my mind, that 2-year-old is given 120 pounds on, we're usually 48 to 50 pounds dry matter intake on our 2-year-old pens. And at the same time, they're still growing. So if you do the whole big equation and you figure out what their feed intake is and what their production is, both on a solids basis, milk basis, and they're still growing, I guess in my mind, they're just going to be even more productive as an older cow. But the problem is, you know, you're turning cows over. We got to change that part of our business, is the turnover, which is one of my huge goals.
So, would you think reducing the number of heifers that you raise, instead of raising them and calling them at the end without even making anything out of them, would you think that's a good idea? Or
to raise them and cull them?
No, that's what you do right now, right? Well, you instead of keeping your cows as long as you'd want to keep them, you call them at an early age. That's what you do.
So my goal is if I can get down to, say I only need 70 heifers a month, and my average age of first calving is 22 months, I don't need 2,250 heifers. So for instance, if you just take 2,250 heifers that we have today, and if I can drop that to 1,850, 1,750, if I can drop 500, I know that that's going to drop my feed cost 50 to 60 cents per hundredweight on the whole operation.
Percentage of heifers that you want, that you keep, and do more of the angers that you do and raise them.
Raise more of the heifers, you're saying?
No, raise angers for beef and sell them when instead of...
Yeah, so I would love to be able to raise the beef calves to an older age because I think you can capture more.
You'll make more instead of selling
them as a wet calf.
Exactly, and also when you raise more heifers, you just put more pressure on the cows that you have, the good cows that you have, and you push them out at an early age than you'd expect to do, right? So.
Yeah, so if we only have 70 heifers per month, if you have 500 fewer heifers, you think about the heifers that you keep are going to even should have better growth, better performance because less overcrowding, less competition.
Yes.
And then, no matter what their genetic potential is, if they get a respiratory event or any setback in growth, they don't perform.
They don't perform at all.
And that's another part of the equation that we've looked at is number of respiratory events. And that's kind of why we kind of look at the health side, the immunity side of how can we have healthier replacements so we don't have to worry about the cost and the lack in growth and production.
Thank you.
This isn't a question, but I know in the operation we have similar genetic program. We've got those numbers down. We need 65 heifers per 100 cows. Because you do a good job on the cow side and raising the heifers, you can keep it down at that area.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of crazy because, if you look at our percentage of involuntary culls to voluntary culls, it's almost probably 80% involuntary.
We have a mixed, we have a mixed,
voluntary.
We have a mixed Jersey and a Holstein herd, and in the Jerseys, 15% involuntary cull, and the Jerseys are over 20,000 pound rolling herd average, and that's a challenge. And it's easy to keep it if you got excellent management on the calf side, the heifer side, and the cow side. But you can get that down around 65.
Yeah,
in that area.
Yeah. And you can save a lot on labor and just cost.
All right. Well, I think
there's one over here.
One more.
You mentioned that the extra heifer calves, once they're genomic tested, you sell them. Where do you sell them?
Currently, between the Aurora Ridge Dairy and the Oakwood Dairy, we try to put a pot load together and sell them as a group. There's some buyers some cattle dealers that we've sold them through. Usually people that are looking to buy replacements for embryos, recipients. It's pretty much who's looking for heifers and who's going to pay the best price. Yep.
All right. Well, let's all show Dave our appreciation for his time. Okay, and that'll conclude our virtual farm tour. So thanks everybody for attending. And see Brenda as you go out the door. There'll be a packet for you. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone.